So good evening and welcome to tonight's event. Continuing the conversation, is nature a part of you and your community? I'm Susie Beiersdorfer, president of the National Community Rights Network, NCRN, and representing Ohio and the Ohio Community Rights Network, OHCRN. Also welcoming you are NCRN board members Nancy Ward from Oregon and ORCRN, Doug Darrell from New Hampshire and NHCRN, and Heidi Divya Bertu from Virginia and BACRN. Okay, so in late February, we hosted a conversation, Do Something Now, Assert Your Community Rights. And the recording is on our website and we'll post it in the chat. But tonight we center on tonight's discussion on our relationship with nature. And we have 4 guests this evening. So we welcome Tish O'Dell, who will moderate. Tish is a community rights and rights of nature organizer and activist for over 12 years with the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, CELDEF, and the OHCRN. She started organizing in her own community of Broadview Heights, Ohio, which led to the adoption of Ohio's first Home Rule Charter Amendment, creating a community bill of rights, banning fracking, and recognizing the rights of nature. We welcome Paul Winnie, who joined us for the February conversation and sparked the interest and organizing for tonight's event. Paul is of the Wolf Clan and resides on the Tonawanda Seneca Nation in eastern New York State, one of the 6 nations, part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, formerly known as the Iroquois Confederacy. The 6 nations consist of the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy were originally 5 independent nation states bound by a central constitution and a common set of laws. Paul is 68 winters and owner of Western Door Trading, LLC. He has been a native and environmental rights activist for 30 years, and Paul shared the featured video with us a month or so ago. And we welcome the creators of the featured video, Kayla Bartkowski and Marielle Scott. Kayla is a photojournalism student going into her 4th year at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Her storytelling focuses on climate change relating to wildlife and people. Kayla's interest is using photography and videography to encourage the creation of livable and thriving communities of people and nature, as well as how they intersect with environmental racism. And Marielle is a 2023 graduate from RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, with a bachelor's of fine art in photojournalism. She's from Burnt Hills, New York, and is currently interning in Annapolis, Maryland, with Alliance in partnership with the EPA for the Chesapeake watershed, producing photo and video. Marielle grew up in a family that encouraged curiosity, experimentation, and learning while exploring the outdoors. It cultivated a deep appreciation and respect for the environment that has only blossomed as she's aged. She now dedicates her time to telling visual stories of how humans connect and interact with the environment and its importance. And finally, with grateful hearts, let us take a moment and acknowledge the presence of our ancestors, which includes all species, the 5 elements of space, air, fire, water, and earth, and the spaces that we call our homes and our communities. So we will have an open discussion tonight. Tish will be moderating, we'll show the video, and then she's going to ask some questions. If you'd like to put questions into chat, Heidi and I will be monitoring that, and we will have an open discussion where people can raise, if you know how to use the raise hand icon in Zoom, you'll go up to the upper left-hand corner so we can recognize you. Otherwise, we will be watchful and make sure that people are able to speak. Again, please speak with brevity, because we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to be part of the conversation if they so choose. And again, please mute yourself so that there will be less distraction. Okay, welcome again, and Tish, handing it over to you.
Thanks, Susie, and thanks for putting this together. I'm gonna we have a theme going of relationship building and how that's part of community building, because this is about community rights. And so you guys wanted to know how me and Paul met, and so I'm going to tell my version of the story. He might have a different version. So just like the rights of nature is about planting seeds and relationship building, so is this story. So backtrack a couple of years, actually. There's a professor at Niagara University, and he contacted CELDEF because his community was under threat of an Amazon warehouse being built there. And so he wanted to have a democracy school, have us do one in Niagara. So that was when I met this professor. And then we formed a relationship. So then after that, we had COVID, so there was shutdown. Well, once the shutdown got lifted, he wanted me to come in person and speak at Niagara about rights of nature to students and other people there. Well, we also invited Paul, because Paul obviously lives in that area. I don't, I'm in Cleveland. So he invited Paul then to speak after I did. And I really liked what Paul had to say. I don't know if Paul liked what I had to say, but he has to address that. I can't speak for him. But anyway, that's how, we've begun having a relationship now, just because I heard his words, he heard mine, we've been talking, and we continue this conversation. And then, as Susie mentioned, I invited him to the last NCRN, and I can't get my letters right, NCRN event that you guys had, and he raised his hand and asked this question. And so everybody really liked the statement you made, I guess. And so you planted more seeds, and that's how now you're a panelist, because you said something profound on that call. So just warning everybody tonight when you raise your hand. And I'm kidding, no, that would be great. I mean, because it's all planning, sharing ideas. So that's how this all works with movement building. So, tonight we have these two young recent graduate, one student, one recent graduate, who made this film and how it impacted all of us. And so I guess I'm curious, did you two, Kayla and Marielle, know each other before you made the film? And I'll let you guys tell a little bit about that. And then maybe you can go ahead and introduce the film so that everyone can watch it and we'll all be on the same page to start this off.
Yeah, I can go ahead. Marielle and I actually did know each other before we did the film. We've been friends for probably since I first or second year came to RIT. We were drawn to each other just because of our love for nature and doing outdoor activities. We both love outdoor climbing and stuff. But we really, we had a class that we were both taking, a climate change and storytelling class. And in that class, at the end of the class, there's one project. And we really want to work together on the project and find something that was local and really got to the heart of what is happening locally in Rochester, because we're from Rochester, New York, in our area. So
yeah, thank you all for coming, first of all. Yeah, Kayla and I knew each other from the beginning, and I mean, for me, I feel like I can speak for Kayla too, but we were both pretty excited about this class and having the opportunity to work together on a project. And so I guess I'll just introduce the film and then questions of background and how we found Paul and Janet. So basically, in 2019, the New York State announced a climate and energy plan to use 70% renewable electricity by 2030 and 100% zero emissions electricity by 2040. The plan includes a $1.8 billion scale up in solar. Rush and Caledonia are two towns outside the city of Rochester already experiencing the push for solar energy. In 2018, Invenergy, a Chicago-based company, proposed constructing an approximately 4,000-acre solar farm called Horseshoe. This project is predicted to provide 180 megawatts of solar energy and will begin construction in 2024. The areas of land the solar panels sit on are leased out by local farmers to the company for 25 years. I do not blame the farmers for doing this, says Rush resident Janet Glocker. It's trying to get people to understand what's at stake here is the tough part. Although Glocker supports renewable energy, she does not support this project. The area proposed for construction contains prime soils for farming and happens to be historically indigenous land where Seneca ancestors have been buried. Through her fight against Horseshoe, Glocker met Paul Winnie, a Tonawanda native who opened Glocker's eyes to the importance of the land and why it should not be disturbed. And with that, Heidi, if you could share the film.
Coming up.
Today we have gathered, and when we look upon the faces around us, we see the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now let us bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. Many people of the world recognize a tree as a symbol of peace and strength. With one mind, we greet and thank the tree life. Now our minds are one.
Nature it's connected in ways that we don't understand. And everybody is so short-sighted now that they don't see that at all. You know, the ancestors shouldn't be disturbed because that's our cultural way. They're there in that place, to remain in that place.
If we could only quiet our Western scientific nature, we could listen to them and learn from them.
Now they're talking about indigenous perspective and indigenous teachings, indigenous lifestyle. They didn't give a shit about it 50 years and 100 years ago.
There's a tree in Caledonia that has been girdled. By that I mean the bark has been cut in a complete circular motion so that the tree will die. The tree needs to die in order to remove the shade from the solar panels. That will be where that tree is.
You look at that and you say, how can anybody do that to a tree, all for the sake of the project? But I think we relate to it as people because we know that that's pretty much what happened to us.
It's possible to be in favor of solar and wind and geothermal and still think that putting this on top of a native grave is appalling. You know, what Paul taught me is that I have no knowledge of history and early Native American life and what it meant to this area. And I'm learning as fast as I can, but not fast enough. And he's doing the best he can.
I have come to regard this as cultural genocide. I think these megawatts, these very few megawatts, are blood megawatts. But the idea that we would use this land inefficiently and improperly for solar is beyond my comprehension.
Nobody has a solution, unfortunately. So all I can do is tell what you can and hope that you come away with it with a better understanding.
I want us to understand that rushing mega projects always results in unanticipated consequences. There's got to be a way that we can deal with climate change without destroying our world. And we have not found it yet.
Thank you again for making that short video, because it says so much in such a short amount of time. And I'm really curious because the way things are going right now, everything's about renewable energy, right? And clean energy, green energy. And I'm just really curious because neither of you live in Rush or Caledonia, correct? And so did you have an opinion about this topic, like negative, positive, neutral, whatever, when you heard about this? Like, first of all, I guess, how did you hear about this solar project? And then two, did you have a preconceived notion going into it?
So this project and the way that we found the story was basically through some Google searches. We knew that we wanted to do a video together, a project together, and I was particularly interested in tapping into any Indigenous communities that were nearby. It's certainly a topic and a group of people that, personally, like for me, like I don't see super often that students reach out to. And so I wanted to tap into that. It was my last project as a senior. And so, we did some quick Google searches, and an article in the Democrat and Chronicle, which is Rochester's local paper, came up, and it was from Indigenous Peoples Day. And it was a protest against the solar farm. And we started looking up the different people who were interviewed in that, and Paul Winnie was one of those, and he reached out pretty quickly back to us, and along with Janet Glocker. And so that's kind of how it came into fruition and how we met them. And in terms of preconceived opinions, the story was not necessarily surprising to me. I think it was more surprising that this was happening on the back steps of our campus. It's only 20 minutes away from our campus. And I think for us, we were like, this is perfect because we need to tell local stories and we want to tell local stories. And this is right here and nobody knows about it. We haven't heard anybody talk about it. And so I think it got us interested to kind of raise that up a little bit. I didn't approve of having the solar panels put in. I think that the way that it went about it was the way that the company went about it was unfair. But also, as trained photojournalists, we try to keep ourselves unbiased as possible and try to learn all sides before any kind of preconceived opinions. But certainly as people who care about the environment and care about local communities, it stung, certainly, to see that.
Yeah, we definitely we wanted to dig deeper into the emotions felt behind this solar farm and bring to light the nature and culture that's continuously being threatened in the past and present and will be in the future. And I think these issues needed to be more brought to light and acknowledged to bring about change, which is something that we we're really drawn to. And another thing that we a lot of times learn in our classes is that people won't like personally attach to a story unless there's a personal aspect or someone that they really can relate to. And I think one thing that's so special about Paul and Janet especially is that they're so passionate about what they do, and they're really driven and want change. And their personalities, I think how knowledgeable they were about everything, we were really drawn to that and knew that they were the people we wanted to help tell their stories and their emotions and feelings through this.
You feel a little more connected to the community after making the film?
I think definitely. I think Paul, just speaking with Paul, like you can speak with him for 5 minutes and learn something. He's just someone that is so knowledgeable and passionate. And the way that he has just taught us on how to respect nature and treat nature. I think my relationship with nature, probably Marielle's too, has just become a lot more intimate, and we've learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I certainly can echo that a little bit. I definitely, it made me sad to graduate. If anything, I mean, I'm now in Maryland, which is a whole nother community that I've never been to, never untapped, and like I'm looking forward to untapping it and trying to get to know that. And that's kind of the beauty of being a working photojournalist, is that you do get to go to different communities and connect with them. But I certainly did feel more of a connection to the place that I've been living for the last 4 years. And it did make me sad to have to leave and move on. Yeah.
Great. Hey, Paul, I want to get you in on this too. So, I mean, I know you don't live actually in Rush, correct? For people on the call, you know, on the webinar, they may not know, you know, because they're not all from New York either in this area. So maybe kind of giving a visual, like where you're located and why you still, even though this isn't directly your community, why you still think it's important for you to get involved, you know, and feel a responsibility to help stop this project.
Well, to the point of not being from that community, my ancestors were from that community because that's our original homeland territory, that and east of that over to Canandaigua Lake. For anybody who doesn't know, that's part of the Finger Lakes, and that's south of Rochester, and I live about 45 minutes towards Niagara Falls away from it, but that area holds, you know, special thoughts for me because of my ancestors. Where I'm at right now isn't actually our territory, or was our original territory. So the people that are buried there on that site, and what you have to remember is that's the Genesee River cuts through both of these towns, north and south, actually runs to Rochester, but it's after the glacier period 10,000 years ago, it's been inhabited for that long, and all of that up and down that river was people moving and establishing different villages and throughout all that time period. So that's why my connection really goes back to that area. Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you too. You guys ended the film with this really powerful statement from Janet, right? Where she says there's got to be a way to deal with climate change without destroying our world. And I'm curious, you know, after making the film and Paul, you being part of the film, you know, if you have any response to that comment at the end of the film, or
I've been on a couple other transition to climate change discussions, and the usage of people in one respect is using less energy and not creating more electric connections where we actually feel free to keep increasing our usage, is one thought that comes to my mind. And because we're kind of under this, economic development coincides with these projects, and it all relates into the overall capitalism of continued progress and development. And to some point, we need to control that somehow. I know it's not within the individual's thing because it's kind of a corporate driven thing, but yeah, that's and putting these things in different locations that are not so destructive to fertile farmland in this case. So that's about what I think.
Marielle or Kayla, do you want to add to that at all? Do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think we ended with that quote for a reason, and it's because we do want people to ask that question to themselves. I mean, I'm only 22 years old, and I certainly don't have the answers to those questions, but I don't know, I think that there's a certain history of fossil fuel consumption that we can look at as a map of, okay, this is what has been done in the past, and if we do need to move towards renewable energy and that's the new path, then we can't be taking the same stones from that path and trying to go down the same route, even though it's renewable energy, because it doesn't work, and it's not sustainable. And so, I don't know, I think it's important to take a look, start at the local level, and, rally into your local government and see who is it that's supporting sustainable futures for future generations. I know, like, for me, like, I am nervous about when I'm 60, 70, 80 years old, like, what is it going to look like? The fact that over on the East Coast right now, we've got a lot of smog in the sky and like haze from wildfires in Canada, like, that's scary. So yeah, I don't know. I think looking at what's been done in the past and how can we shift our priorities a little bit.
Yeah, and to make clear for everybody else on the webinar too, so they understand this project more, the power that's generated from this immense project and solar panels is not going to be used by the residents of Rush or Caledonia, right? Where's it going? Do you know where it's going?
I can't quite remember. Paul might know better than me. But it's not necessarily for the people who are living in that town. You're correct. It's basically like going into that percentage of renewable and like solar energy in the electric grid of New York State. And so they're trying to reach this percentage by a certain year. And it feels very thrown together almost of like, okay, we have to reach this percentage, so we're just going to throw this in right now. And we can't think like that. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, there are more projects in the area, almost that same size, kind of in between me and Rochester. There's a couple other different large projects like that are going in and all being backfed into the grid, and it's not necessarily for the local consumption or discount or whatever. So and in New York State there's also a lot of smaller ones going in, so, and it all goes in conjunction with wherever the infrastructure is suitable or can be reestablished to handle the extra power. And you kind of see where there's new lines being put in all over the area to bump up the infrastructure to handle the solar projects.
Yeah, kind of like going off of what they're saying too. I think that one thing that Paul really has been teaching us and me is that is touched on in the video is the importance to live in harmony with nature and how humans have a responsibility to protect nature because nature can't speak for itself. So it's our job to look out for it. I think it's also incredibly important that we as people take initiatives to educate ourselves about the indigenous ways and beliefs on nature, because it can give us an incredibly new perspective, as well as a new relationship with it. And I think for the future, my outlook is that people just need to get out of their own bubble and realize, like Janet said in the video, admit that the history that you learned growing up isn't all facts, and that you need to get out of your bubble to be able to learn, listen to other people's experiences. And I think from that, people will realize that what is occurring, and maybe that will be able to bring about change relating to climate and nature too.
No, that's great. And I know, Marielle, when you described it, like the bricks, like just putting the bricks back in the same place, that was a really good visual, because that's what we're doing, right? I mean, using communities as resource colonies, whether it's for solar or whether it's for wind or whether it's for coal or whether it's for, you know, fracked gas, it doesn't matter. And that's the part where we have to not put it together the same way. I think I really liked the visual you created with that. Putting them together in a different way was good. Somebody did you want to say something, Paul, there? Was that you? No? Oh, no, maybe someone
Maria
else.
had her thing off. What I did want to play on to Kayla, what we talked about earlier, was that indigenous perspective is the cultural aspect to our connection, and our teachings and everything we do is connected to nature. So what doesn't occur is that respect on the outside I'm talking about, where you actually revere nature and want to protect it. And that's not something that's solely just indigenous, because every person, you know, is on this earth, and it's our mother, because it gives us everything that we need to live, and everything that is here from the Creator is already a perfect situation. So we have to try to take that and respect it and honor it and protect it. And out of all this, the meeting tonight, I would think everybody has that responsibility, because we have a responsibility. That's what we're put here for. And go out and spend some time and teach teach your friends or teach other people about this video and about this thought. And that's how we will get to climate change, when we get people to really realize you know, how precious nature is.
Yep, I agree with you. Some of it is, you know, the language we use too, because I heard somebody, I don't remember which one of you, and calling it a solar farm. You know, it's like that idea, it's not a farm. We hear that all the time. They're wind farms, right? I don't say that. I mean, let's call it what it is. You know, it's an industrialized energy project. It's not, but you know, farm makes it sound less dangerous or less harmful. I'm looking, Marion has her hand up.
Yes, I have been raising awareness about rights of nature law in my area, Media, Pennsylvania, which is about 20 minutes south of Philly. And I keep getting the response that, well, that will take a total change in mindset. And I don't know how to address that. Does anybody have any ideas?
Well, that's, yeah, as a community rights and rights of nature organizer, I face that every day of my life as well. But to me, the whole thing, that's the idea of the planting the seeds, and putting the idea, at least in someone's mind, is a first step. So, you know, we're taught that it's not valuable if we don't see immediate results. You know, like we want these immediate, like, we do something and then there's an immediate action that follows that. And unfortunately, we have to go through this step, because when we look at past movements, and I know we're all put pressure on us, like we have to hurry up and do this because the end is coming sooner, than we can think. So that's the added pressure we have on us, but we can't really skip the steps. I mean, people have to hear the idea first before they can even consider it, at least in Western culture, because it's not something we've ever been taught or heard about. And so we can't just say, here's a law. And that's what we've realized, I think, at CELDEF and those of us working on community rights and rights of nature, because we've spent 28 years trying to get laws passed. And it's trying to skip that step of educating people and having that cultural shift. And like what Paul's saying, that we have to feel connected to nature first, because you love it and you care about it and you want to protect it, then you want to protect what you love. And so, and it's not an either or, like, legal or cultural, because we have this discussion all the time. And that's why they have to kind of both be happening. So I wouldn't get discouraged, Miriam, by what, people are saying, because it still has to, if no one says it and no one talks about it, then we can't ever get to where we need to go.
Yeah, the other thing that I hear is, well, so you want to treat nature like a person, but what about me? I get this, what about me? I'm more important.
Yeah, those are all questions, right? Individualism versus, the community, the commons and things like that. That's then have a discussion about that. And I think everything is out of balance. And this is just my opinion. And that's part of the problem. We have to get more in balance to try and figure some of this out. And I know, Paul, you want to say something, I think, here.
Yeah, to work out that conversation, I would ask them how they feel that corporations have human rights above that person.
Right.
So that would, to me, get them thinking, if they're worried about their own rights, which I know we're talking community rights, but these projects are examples of the removal of your local community rights, because in this horseshoe case, the accelerated application process negated the local ordinances and called them nuisance ordinances. And that's how New York State is moving forward to get around that, so that they can okay these permits. So they're stripping you of your local rights, your inherited town rights, or whatever.
Absolutely. And I spoke to a representative, a legislator in my district, and she is totally on board, and she is trying to get legislation to give communities in Pennsylvania the right to protect their environments, like townships and boroughs. Give them the right to, because in Pennsylvania, we don't have that right now.
I don't know, maybe you've seen the news we just had come out of CELDEF in the last couple of weeks about Grant Township in Pennsylvania.
Yes, I did see it. Yeah.
All of that, yeah. I mean, it's been a long, hard battle, but the well's getting plugged and no waste has been injected in their community. So
that's great. And yeah, I've been waiting for Chad Nicholson to set up a Zoom meeting for our community. And he's been so busy with Grant Township that he hasn't been able to do it yet, but so hopefully soon.
Yeah, he'll get to you. He will. It's been really busy the last few weeks with Grant. We're not used to being on this side, the winning side of a it's new for us.
Yeah.
You're called the bad guys, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. In that big article in the paper, the bad guys win is what the headline was.
Another thing that I was thinking about also, Marianne, for what you had said is, I think that every environmental issue as well affects humans, not just the environment. So finding the human aspect within each issue is how you can get people to care, showing that each environmental issue is affecting, like, every person that it's affecting has like a family, a life, a story, hobbies, etc. Just making that personal connection, and showing them that there's other people here. It's not just the environment, there's people.
Yeah, that's good.
People have to understand they are nature. We are nature. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you got to get people to get to that point, because in our Western culture, that's not how we're taught. We're taught that we're separate and we're above nature. And so, but having the conversations are what's important.
Yeah, and right now we're battling mosquito spray companies in our little town, in our little borough. They're spraying, and it's affecting people all around them that are planting native gardens and killing every pollinator that we could attract. And so we're trying to educate the community about how important biodiversity is, because it regulates, it's important to ecosystems, and ecosystems regulate climate. So we're, doing a big educational push with that right now, but we're really having a hard time stopping the mosquito spraying. Right now, we're working on it with the borough. So hopefully the borough council is going to approve a letter that we want to send out to every homeowner in our borough.
You're doing the right thing by continuing to keep trying to educate. So
Yeah.
don't get disheartened.
Okay.
There's lots of us here.
Okay.
When we were discussing this event, the members of the NCRN and Tish was on, and Paul and Kayla, we talked. I found a quote by Aristotle, which is, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. And that, if we don't have the stories, if we don't have the connections with each other and with nature, it's all pretty sterile. So I know everyone here knows that.
Yeah, and I think that's what Kayla is just touching on, is one of the big proponents of, this class that we took. It's climate change storytelling. And the thing that our professor would hark on us all the time is that every story is a climate change story. And it's because everything is connected to our environment. Every single story that we go out and find, you can connect it to the environment. And it's not necessarily, people going onto their news sites or opening up their newspaper, they're not flipping to the climate change page, because that's just not, at the end of the day, it's not something that most people are interested in. And so it's about finding what's the human health story, what's happening to like this animal out here, or like how is this affecting businesses. Like that's the stuff that people connect with. But also, if we can take those climate change stories and kind of hide them underneath these different viewpoints of storytelling and human connection, that's when I think we're going to see some serious change. And I think that's what Kayla and I were hoping to do with this video, is, show passionate people in order to make them care about Rush and Caledonia and ancestral land.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point, Marielle, because that's like, but what are we taught? What are we taught by the system? To have a bunch of data and facts. You need science and data and facts. And so we get so distracted on gathering more and more and more of that, and then not doing any of the actual storytelling, and which makes us not trust our gut, right? And things we know from living in the community that we see around us. Because it's not scientific, but you just know in your gut, because you're connected to nature and your community, that it's wrong.
Yeah.
I guess a question for you guys is that I'm really curious about, is there anything like when you were making the video, or Paul, from you going around talking, to different places at different events and that really surprised you, like some story that, something that was unexpected, or some trend or whatever, I don't know what it is, but if something that surprised you?
I'll jump in. I don't know if it was more surprising than it was really feeling the story for what it was, but it was when we finally drove over to see the tree that had gotten girdled. And we had multiple interviews with Janet before that. We had multiple visits with Paul before that, and we had just kept hearing about this tree over and over again. And we're like, okay, what is it about this tree? And like, how can we make this comparison that like this tree is really representational of everything that, you know, people have gone through. And so when we finally, Janet took us over to where it was, and I think finally seeing it was when it hit the hardest. It's on the side of the road, and it's this beautiful big tree, and it was springtime, and you could tell as we were filming it, we're zooming in on the branches, there's no buds on it, and it looks different from the other trees that are around. And I don't know, it definitely hit hard, I think, for me, seeing that in person.
Yeah, I'd say going off of that, it's the tree just wasn't like the type of tree that it was an oak tree. And I think Paul can speak on this more, but just the importance of oak trees within your culture, Paul, and how it impacts just seeing that.
Yeah, the rally that we had on Indigenous Peoples Day, that was a thing that we used as an example of not respecting the nature. And see, the project isn't even okayed yet the farmer went ahead and did that, anticipating, you know, what's coming down the line. And that's not the only tree. Those are large 200-year-old oak trees. So yeah, that's the best connection that that's an example for people to really take heart into it. I know as a Native person speaking here, I have all the history research I've done, and that area was attacked by Sullivan Clinton. George Washington sent them into our territory to scorch and burn all the villages as to set an example after the war. And that's why we don't live in that area anymore, because we left to go to Fort Niagara, and we're refugees in our own country. So, you know, what I can speak about is all these different examples of what's going on today. It's just the same thing. Scorch and burn, take the food away. They burned all the corn crops so that we couldn't return to it. And, you know, so you know, that's the perspective that I get into these things, because it's a real big picture for me. And it's not just a solar thing. It's I see where this colonizing policy is still going on. I mean, I think people are being still colonized, if you want to, even everybody, non-native too, you're still being colonized into being the way they want you to be. So at some point, like that lady said, that if the mindset has to change, that's what we're all about here, is telling people that yes, the mindset has to change. The paradigm shift has to occur in order for it to have change. And you know, I can tie so many other stories into all of this, just based on a whole nother show of this on an Indigenous perspective, and not me. It's just there's thousands of other Native people that have been speaking, and you can go on YouTube and you can hear the same thing all over again. I was just telling Kayla, listening to so many people speak, Native and other people, I hear the same story that they talk about 25 years ago. If they did a YouTube, they're talking about taking uranium in Arizona, you know, and when you get to the personal effect, natives are dying because they were sacrifice zones for all of these projects and will be sacrifice zones for the future green energy products to create the electric batteries with the lithium and other materials that are located on or near our territories, whether it's the tar sands oil in Canada that all leak contaminated waste downstream into the reservations that are next to the oil fields, and then the people get sick and die. Those are the interviews that nobody puts out there that much. I do, because I pay attention to my cultural events and going on and our different traumas that we're living through. So it's not something that I take lightly, and I hope other people really can put themselves in my shoes, and my shoes are speaking for the animals and the plants that can't talk for themselves, because to me that we're all one, like you said. So
Yeah, I really appreciate you talking about that, and the colonization still going on today. To me, that comes back to language, right? We don't talk about it that way, but I call it corporate colonization. And it is impacting all of us, because even when we talked about the smoke earlier from the wildfires, that's not just impacting, I thought immediately of the birds, because I know in our area, we've talked about birds before, and they're struggling as it is, but then they're breathing that, right, all the time. They can't go indoors and shut the windows of their house and try to not breathe it. Yeah, so it's really, I heard so many people even in my community. So this isn't, just impacting one culture of people or race of, or one community. It's impacting all of us. I mean, you can't get away from it. And how many people I heard in my community that said, well, I'll just move. So that, we have fracking refugees, but it's again saying what it is. It's not a whole community, but people like, I can't stay here, or like in places they've polluted so much, like East Palestine, or that, that it's too polluted. We can't stay here anymore. When you said, Paul, about, and I'm thinking of the film and all those solar panels going over farmland. And when you said they took away food, right, burned the fields and took, well, now instead they're just going to put solar panels over the farm fields and you can't get food. So, yeah, we have to wake up and start recognizing what's really going on and calling it, talking about it the way it is. And yeah, not letting them just set the agenda of the conversation. So I, again, appreciate your film so much. Someone I saw, how do you put in text, how has this film been shared on social media, and how can we share it? So before we, I want to get that before we sign off on this meeting.
Marielle and I can talk about it, but we could probably put it up on like a YouTube or something.
That would be great. So more people.
Yeah, I can send a email out to let you know.
And then we can share it. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
I'm glad you put it up. It's a really nice video. And like you said, it's not just teaching, for the mind. It's also very emotional. You're getting the passion from Paul and Janet. And I hope you continue doing this work, because the two of you have done a great job. And I hope you share this widely. Let us know how we can help you. Please keep it up, because the future's in your hands, and you're great storytellers.
And if you need any story ideas, we have tons of them.
Oh, I will be sure to reach out. I mean, I'm working up in Maryland for the Chesapeake Bay, and it's for the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So I can span myself through 5 states. Yeah. Thank you, Kirk, for your kind words. This is certainly something that I will be dedicating the rest of my life to. So.
Are there other questions that people who are on the call have?
Doug had his hand up a while ago.
Yeah, I was thinking about, we've talked about these things for so long now, for years, and the elders here all know it hasn't changed. We've been educated to do what we're doing right now. That's why you can't seem to find a majority of people that are willing to think because we're so programmed to be satisfied with materialism that's really in contrary to the balance of nature. And the whole economic system is really a war machine, because we're at war still in this world. And so they have to create capital. And it has to do with modernization, because who's got the best weapons wins, right? Space program is a total farce, because man can't live in outer space. When I say man, I mean mankind. And nature talks to us. If you listen, it's like in the picture there, in the video I saw, you see the deer looked at you, and the deer gave a certain head nod and moves, and it's speaking. And these are observations. And in the great naturalists of the past, well, in the 1800s, like Moore and Thoreau and Emerson, all these different people that were looking at things in a transcendental way, we had to transcend above this materiality and recognize life is really truly spiritual, and the material part is just dust that goes from one form into another through the ages, what we call the timeline. But there is no time; it's all eternal, and it's forever. And we've already done this before, and it's in the ruins that we see before the Great Ice Age. You can see what has happened before. There was great technologies that were known that we don't even understand this day. But they did self-destruct, didn't they? So we may be just on the same path, you know. And I'm not saying to be fearful of it, but it's good to speak the truth. And this truth comes from the heart. And that's the only way you're going to bring about the change, because it's in the people already. They're just afraid to speak up against what we've been so trained to follow. And even though, I know my people that came from Europe, and what they did, they took away what was not theirs. And then there was those that really wanted to exploit the place, and they didn't care about anything about people, indigenous people. And we were talking about this the other night when we were on our meeting, but we're all indigenous in some form or another. We're all from some place, and we've traveled all over this world. Technology we have today is bonehead technology, because they just waste, and it's just for a thrill. So there has to be an enlightenment somehow, and then things will change. I don't know how, all you can do is demonstrate it in your own self, in your own life every day. And cast the light of cast the beam from your own eye, which is the light. And you cast out the beam in your brother or sister's eye, because when you look at your fellow man in the right light, you give them the space to open up their heart, possibly, and to change their ways. And then they see that there's nothing to be afraid of to make these changes.
I think there's a lot of people too that are talking about this is the time of enlightenment. Like some people like to get pressed about what they see and what they're reading and all that, but it's again shifting our minds, right? That this actually can be the opportunity. This is the time when we can make a shift. So it's again that always how we frame things, how we look at things. That's our choice. I mean, we don't have to be negative. We can see what's going on, acknowledge it, and use it to make the change, because we're open to that now. And I'm curious too, I hate to keep, putting this on you guys. I know you're not the voices of all young people, but most of us on these calls are usually older. But what do you guys hear? I'm really curious, like on campus and in your circles, and are there issues that are being talked about that, maybe we're not up here? Like what's the mindset of the culture on the campus at RIT?
I would say, I mean, we go to a definitely more liberal school, so it's definitely more talked about than probably in other schools. But especially in our specific field of study, which is photojournalism, we don't go into this field unless we're passionate about bringing light to issues or want to enact change. So I think specifically within our major, it's talked about a lot. Our professors within our community, we are constantly talking about what is occurring current events in the past. And it definitely is talked about around campus, but I don't think it is talked about it enough.
You feel a sense, a sense of hope, I guess, or because we always hear that, like how students, are just so, down about all this or whatever, that they feel paralyzed. There's nothing they can do or whatever.
I don't know if it really goes in one direction or another. I mean, when it comes to people that I interact with, I think, we choose the people that we interact with. And so all of those people for me are people who do talk about these issues and do have those conversations pretty often. And like Kayla said, like our line of work of what we're doing are people who are passionate about issues and who want to make a difference. I think that's one of the things that you talk about as a photojournalist. It's like, oh, I want to change the world, and like that's the sentence that everybody says when you get into this field. When it comes to general population, I mean, for me, I feel like it's slightly divided. There's people who do feel hopeless and are nervous about the future or don't want to worry about it and just want to live a young person's life and not stress about those things of the future, which, I think I can understand. But then there's also people who are extremely motivated in trying to make a difference. And I think the important thing is that, I've got a lot of friends who are really motivated to make a difference locally. And that's the other thing that we talked about a lot in this class that we took. And it's about creating national stories, finding national stories at a local level. How can people, see national issues in their own communities? And that helps you understand your community and get to know your community a lot more. I think that's what motivated Kayla and I to do this story. Like Paul said, like colonization is everywhere, and it's continuing to be everywhere. And how can we see that at the local level? So I don't know. I think a lot of young people are pretty divided, but for me, I choose to see the hopeful side, because if I don't, then how am I going to be able to sustainably live through this life of telling these stories? I have to keep that hope.
I'd also say, I was just reading the comment, and I think Phil's right on with how the fires that are occurring are going to be a smoke signal, which is a talking point for communities, because people won't start caring unless it personally affects them, which is the thought process of a lot of people today. And as we get older and years pass, climate change is becoming more and more prevalent. So more people are going to become affected. So I think I'm optimistic in the fact that more people, because they're personally going to be affected, they'll realize this is happening. We need change. It's unfortunate, but I think that's just how society is, that everyone's so stuck in their own mindset that if they're not personally affected, it won't do change. So I'm hoping that, like what Phil is saying, the smoke and the fires that are happening are going to be a bigger talking point. And as more stuff occurs in the environment, it will be a bigger conversation.
Yeah, in terms of indigenous thoughts and philosophies, there was a conference at the UN, and indigenous, this goes back many years, that they were there to warn of what we were going to be facing if we don't stop doing what we're doing. there's a tribe in South Africa that spoke out. There's a video on that where they live pretty much self-sustaining, but they wanted to come to their brothers and tell them that the climate change is real and we're actually into an extinction mode if we don't do something to stop it. So that's kind of like another aspect of what I understand of and appreciate of the warnings that have already been given to us. And I would have a quick question for Marielle. The EPA decision by the Supreme Court a week ago redefined wetlands, of which you're in a watershed area, and I guess it's, to me, I want to see where that's going, but is that an enlightening educational example for you in I wanted to hear your opinion on where that went.
Well, I'm certainly disappointed where that went. I saw that, I think it came up on my news notifications a couple days before I left to come to Maryland, and I was like, oh great, I'm working for the I'm working for the EPA, and now they're getting suppressed even more. And it hasn't been surprisingly much of a topic of conversation in the office recently, and I think that's partially because, you know, there's been other things that we've been trying to cover. It is a swath of 5 states that we're, you know, it's all nonprofit work, and we're constantly trying to cover events and supporting fundraising for local organizations. That's what I've been doing for the past 2 days. So it hasn't been too much of a conversation as of recent, but it was certainly disappointing to see that. But at the same time, you know, I had that disappointment, but also it put a bit of a fire under me to be like, okay, so the work that I'm doing and the place I'm working for, you know, it needs help. And so I felt good to be somebody who can come in and help that. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
It's back to the block, you know, the bricks, Marielle, and like, do we want to, because I think I'm curious if anyone at the EPA ever talks about, you know, the system itself and understanding that the job of the EPA is really to regulate the harms, not stop the harms, and to just issue the permits that allow the harms to happen, you know. And so, you know, if that, you haven't been there very long, I understand that. I was curious. I mean, we did a protest one several years ago in Columbus, the capital of Ohio, and someone came out to us and kind of really quietly said, keep doing what you're doing. We support you. And I was like, oh, who are you? He's like, oh, I work for the EPA. And he's like, over there. He's like, I go, well, would you say that, you know, and it was against fracking. And he's like, no, I can't do that. I'm afraid I'll lose my job. He's like, but keep doing what you're doing. So yeah. Wondered if that you'll hear any of that. And it's interesting because the agency itself, I mean, we have to understand it's around, right? Since 19, and the environment has gotten worse and worse and worse. So at some point you would think people ask, is it really because it doesn't have enough funding, or is it because it's not set up to actually do what we think it's supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I'm certainly going to try and find that out myself.
You find that out and you document that, you make a film about that.
Yeah. But you know, what I think is really cool about the place that I'm working at is it's a nonprofit through another organization that is funded by the EPA. So there's a lot of different organizations wrapped around the place that I'm working at right now. And what's cool about it's called the Chesapeake Bay program, is they provide funding for places and organizations and even individual people who are looking to do projects to better their local communities. Yesterday, I went into Baltimore and there was a woman who had, she was donated 10 acres of land in this Baltimore neighborhood where there's this huge farm that she's created for her community. And, you know, that's the kind of things that I would love to focus on. It's like, okay, what are people doing at a local level that's like really making a difference? I mean, there's kids who like, you know, have never been able to go out into a forest that now have that opportunity to do so because she's created this area. And so I think it's cool to stand behind an organization like this where I'm at, to be able to support that and to find people like that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's again, if the system isn't going to provide what you need, then creating it on your own. So like an alternative system.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have anything? That was a comment, Phil, in the chat. I'm surprised. And Tom, you put in the chat that in Colorado, you guys have hosted Indigenous people who have suggested that we work together, organizing around tribal law and the treaties between tribes and the United States of America.
Yeah, we have most recent person was a few years ago when Naya Locke came, and she was really interested to see how we could work together. And you know, I don't know anything about tribal law. I don't know anything about treaties. I just know the history of treaties being broken time and time again. And you know, you don't hear from, you know, Western settler culture anything about really honest about being in accord with nature or being even custodians of nature, other than having dominion over nature and, you know, wrestling it to our obedience for our selfish purposes. But I'm just thinking that there might be some promises that have been broken that should be brought up, and you know, like if we were going to try and protect a piece of land and it was actually land that had never been you know, bargained with or traded with the United States of America, that still belonged to, you know, in right, in history, it would still belong to the indigenous people. You know, it would be interesting to discuss that with people, because I mean, I don't have specifics on that. I don't understand tribes. I mean, I'd really like to know more about how tribes lived, what current tribes are doing, what sort of legal systems they set up. And recently I read something that about what Mahatma Gandhi wrote about the village republic, and how these, you know, that his ideal would be that people organize around groups of about 1,000 or 1,500, and that their communities would be sovereign. And I have a feeling that's kind of the way things were here before the settlers came in and destroyed it all.
Yeah.
Is there anything to this that anyone can speak about?
There's all kinds of history. I mean, the one that Paul had a ton of history that he can share with people. I mean, there's a lot of books out there written about Indigenous history. There's Sundance that we had on with the Ohio Community Rights Network. He shared a lot of history. So it's there, but it's up to us, I think, to find it and read it and absorb it and contact these people. And Paul's very generous with sharing information that he knows.
Yeah, when you asked that question, what I gained or what I saw out of that video, or what struck me out of that video, and in my travels, even locally, I refer to us, we're kind of invisible. We're 1% of the population, and our issues aren't spoke about, or and that kind of thing. So that's what I strike out, where people don't have the knowledge of Native history. And to me, it's very easy. If you just Google, any kind of Native thing, whether it's Native speakers or Native podcast, you can gain a lot of information from those, even if you just get into the American Indian movement, of which, I kind of grew up under that. It leads to the understanding of what we're talking about, what the, I guess the other thing too is, I don't really consider myself a United States citizen, because I live on a territory that's supposed to be sovereign. There's debate about what sovereignty actually means, because we're still under the United States in some fashions. But there's always, for us and you, I mean, they're always closing the door. I just got an email today how, even though the McGirt decision gave back the jurisdiction part to the Oklahoma, in the state of Oklahoma, McGirt, they just had, goes against an idea I had about tribes adopting people so that they could basically join us if they wanted to, so that we could take them in and have our own, actually grow back into a new country. But the Supreme Court in that state just ruled against what they had, was what they call freedmen, which were Black people that were adopted by the tribe or taken in by the tribes there. And then when there was a criminal thing where they let the one guy off, but the other guy that was technically Black, who had membership to the tribe through this freedman thing, was not allowed, was prosecuted because his blood type, because he was not an actual Native, even though he was an enrolled member because of the, being taken as a slave and then actually being part of the tribe. And then they kept membership for those people after the Civil War. So that door has been closed. And, so what you would think, you have any kind of idea of doing things, they're closing the doors before we get there. The Supreme Court decision on the ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Protection case, that's going to be decided very soon, will put a damper on the sovereignty of us, because it questions that. So, pay attention to these kind of things. I mean, you may see a blurb that ICWA gets passed, or they'll go against that judgment, and then that puts a whole nother perspective on our future, and but I would want to say that before we go here, that if you take a look at, everybody here has probably already done their enlightening thing, but passing that on to your kids and grandkids, and teaching them the best way you can. I know that's where the hands of this world is, in that we create and have good parents, because there are situations where the kids experienced so much trauma, and if a paradigm shift actually does occur, it's got to be coming from, you know, good parenting, so that, you know, the kids aren't reflecting that trauma later on. So, you know, exposing, like in my case, you know, explaining the history, which I've done to Kayla a little bit, trying to give her a couple examples of what we've been through. But it's, to me, it's not all about what happened in the past. It's where we go in the future. So that's what I'm hoping can come out of groups like this, that we obviously respect the past, but, you know, we got to clear our minds and do respectful thinking, because, you know, we're just minerals, liquids, and metals of the earth. We are the earth. And that's really all you have to know, is that, you know, you're no different than, you know, a tree or an ant. We're all made up of the same thing. I'll end with that. And I would like to say that we are the thunder that they don't hear. And hopefully they'll listen to us.
I really appreciate you. That was a perfect way to end on this, because it comes back to, you know, talking about values and morals and all that. And I think we make the mistake of constantly going to the government, which is this I call it the system, right? And they're the ones doing the harm. And so we expect them to act in a different way, but we are the government, right? So that's the other part. But so in our community, starting there is so important, because the values in our communities are important. What's important, the people who have to live together in a physical place, right? Clean air, clean water, what you're talking about, Paul, having good parenting, you know, a good community is the same thing. Healthy, we all want to be healthy. We want our kids to be healthy. And so it's a great place to start. And then those values hopefully get translated into laws that, you know, reflect those values of clean, health, sustainable living in the future, and caring about each other, caring about the earth and each other in the community. So I really appreciate you guys. Please share that video with us when you post it on YouTube, so we can spread it out, because it's a great conversation starter. Appreciate everyone who's stayed to be on the call, because we know 9:30 is late. And you see, it's only what, 5:30 there, 6:30.
Yeah, you all need to move to the West Coast.
Oh yeah, for these calls, yeah. And if you look in chat, there's other things people put there. I know I've read an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. That was a good book. And Phil just put in Reading the Speech of Chief Seattle from 1854. So thank you all. And Susie, I'll let you close it out. Your NCRN.
Yes, I would love to share a Hopi Elders prophecy that I found a number of years ago. And I did put it just in the chat now, but if you'll indulge me. The Hopi Elders, you have been telling people that this is the 11th hour. Now you must go back and tell the people that this is the hour. And there are things to be considered. Where are you living? What are you doing? What are your relationships? Are you in right relation? Where is your water? Know your garden. It is time to speak your truth, create your community, be good to each other, and do not look outside yourself for your leader. Then he clasped his hands together, smiled, and said, "This could be a good time. There's a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore. They will feel they are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, keep our eyes open and our heads above the water. And I say, see who is in there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey come to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration. We are the ones we have been waiting for. Hopi Elders Prophecy, June 8th, which is today of 2000. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you for that, Susie.
Yes,
Thank you, everyone.
yes,
Thank
we
you
will
so much for coming.
see you again.